Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about auxiliary verbs. Now, what is an auxiliary verb? Now, I'm sure that many of you would have seen these verbs before, but you may not have known what to call them, okay? So that verb that you would have seen, or those verbs that you would have seen, are called auxiliary verbs, okay? So what is an auxiliary verb? Now, as the name suggests, an auxiliary verb provides support. It is a verb that is used along with a main verb to express tense, modality, mood, or voice. So when I say support, this is what I mean. I'm referring to these elements. So auxiliary verbs are used along with a main verb to express the following, right? Or the above. So that means that they cannot stand by themselves. They need another verb, which we call the main verb. And the main verb in a sentence is going to be the verb that states the action or state of being of the subject. So, for example, Mark climbs the tree, right? So climbs in that sentence would be the verb, because that describes that expresses the action of the subject, and that's an action verb, okay? But if I say Mark is climbing the tree, now we have two verbs. We have is and then we have climbing. So climbing is going to be the main verb because climbing is going to be the verb that states the action of the subject. But is going to be the auxiliary verb because is provides more information about climbing, and is shows that this is happening in the present tense, right? So that's just an example, okay? And we're going to see that shortly. So auxiliary verbs are used to give support, right? They can add information about tense, modality, mood, or voice. And of course, we are going to analyze each of those elements. Now, they are mainly used to create complex grammatical tenses such as the perfect and continuous tenses. So you would most of the time you would associate auxiliary verbs with compound tenses, tenses which involve two or more verbs, okay? So that's the main or the primary way we identify auxiliary verbs. But of course, as you see above, there are other uses. But when it comes to these verbs, there are three main auxiliary verbs: be, have, and do. Those are the three main ones. And you will see why those are the three main ones, because when it comes to the functions, these are the three verbs that are going to be used, okay? So these are the three main auxiliary verbs in English, okay? So let's look at the first element of support, which is going to be tense, right? So we have be and have. If we want to express the future, we use the verb will, right? Plus the main verb. And the main verb is going to be in the infinitive or the base form of the verb, which means that it has not been conjugated to agree with any subject, right? I will become a billionaire. Well, I wouldn't mind. I will become a billionaire. So we have two verbs. We have will and we have become. Become is going to be our main verb, okay? And will is going to be our auxiliary verb. And what does will indicate? Will indicates that this is in the future. So the will in this case is marking tense. If I say I become a billionaire, that's just in the present, right? But the will indicates that this is the future tense. So it is providing that assistance there, right? Now, when it comes to the continuous tenses, we are going to have the verb to be, which will function as an auxiliary verb. And then we have the continuous form of the verb in the ing. So, you know, if you see a verb and it ends in the suffix ing, that verb is in the continuous form, right? So we are playing football. Playing obviously is our main verb because it states what we are doing. But the R in this case is indicating the tense, that this is happening right now, right? It is a continuous action in playing, right? But the R indicates that it is happening right now as we speak. The lawyers were expecting that rebuttal. Now, expecting will be our main verb, and were is going to be our auxiliary verb because it indicates the tense, when. Okay, so the lawyers were expecting. Expecting indicates that it was a continuous action, that the action is ongoing, right? But now when we include were, that is going to indicate that this was happening in the past, right? So we've now moved from present to past. And that is what the verb to be is doing. This is what the verb to be is doing. It is indicating tense when it comes to the continuous form, okay? And Susan will be teaching the class today. The will be is going to indicate that this is the future, okay? And of course, the main verb is going to be teaching, all right? So, yes. With perfect tenses, we're going to have the verb to have, which will be conjugated according to the subject, and then we have the past participle of the main verb, right? So the school has opened. Once again, has indicates that this is the present tense, right? We had already left. Had indicates that this is the past tense. Okay, so with the perfect tense, you're going to have the verb to have followed by the past participle of the main verb, right? Now, the perfect continuous tenses, you're going to have two auxiliary verbs, to be and to have, followed by the continuous form of the main verb, right? So you're going to have two auxiliary verbs, to be, to have, and then the continuous form of the main verb. So what forms do we use for the auxiliary verbs? So we conjugate have according to the tense and the person, right? The past participle of to be, which will be been, right? And then of course the continuous form of the main verb. For example, she has been sleeping all night. That's present. You see, we have has, which is the verb conjugated according to subject and tense. Been is going to be the past participle of the verb to be, and both of those are auxiliary verbs. Sleeping all night. I have been working here for a long time. Have been, right? It should be had been, my bad. Let me change that. That should, because this is past. So it should be I had been working here for a long time. Right, my bad. It should be I had been working. Right, because this is past tense. So I had been working here for a long time. And then we have next year, we will have been dating for 10 years. So will have, that's the future tense. And then we have the past participle been. All right. So you would see with tense, the auxiliary verb is going to be the verb that is used to indicate the tense, whereas the main verb is either going to be in the participle, is either going to be in the past participle, or is going to be in the continuous form, right? So this is tense. This is the aspect of tense. Now we are going to proceed to modality. Okay, so we continue and we are moving on to modality. So when I say modality, I'm really referring to modal verbs. But what are modal verbs? So modal verbs express different meanings of the main verbs, such as possibility, ability, permission, necessity, or suggestion. So these are the elements that are expressed by modal verbs, okay? Modals are used with the infinitive form of the main verb. So the infinitive form without the to, that's what I should also add, right? So modals are going to be words like might, should, etc. Those are not action verbs, right? These are verbs that express necessity, probability, ability, etc., right? So it might rain tomorrow. Might expresses possibility, and that would be our auxiliary verb. So modals are auxiliary verbs because they need to be used with the main verb. Okay? They cannot be used alone. Right? So it might rain tomorrow. That expresses possibility, might. And of course our main verb will be rain. I can fix it. Can would be our auxiliary verb, which is the modal, and fix would be the main verb, and that expresses ability. You may go to the bathroom. May expresses permission. The students must study for their exams. Must indicates necessity. We should travel to Spain. Should indicates suggestion. Now you would see that some of these words can actually fit into more than one category, right? So these are called, they can also be called modal auxiliaries, right? Or modal verbs, but they're used as auxiliary verbs, okay? And one thing to know about modals is that they do not follow subject-verb agreement rules. So the verb does not have to agree with the subject. The modal verb will stay the same. Must will be must, should will be should. No, it doesn't matter. Okay? So modals do not follow subject-verb agreement. They remain the same. Okay? Mood. Now, what is mood? Mood is going to refer to the tone and intention of a sentence. In English, there are three moods. Well, generally three moods, right? So we have the imperative, which I have here, the indicative, and the indicative would just be what we would have done earlier with the different tenses, the present, the past, and the future. But the indicative is based in reality, right? Things that actually happen, okay? We have the interrogative, and then we have the subjunctive, right? So we're going to look at each one. Imperative. So the imperative is used to talk about, to give orders, requests, etc. Do eat the vegetables. So we have two verbs. We have do and eat, right? Do is also placing emphasis on eat. And this is something that we are going to return to shortly. Do eat the vegetables. Why not just say eat the vegetables, right? Interrogative, of course, that deals with questions. Did you know that? Did is our auxiliary verb, okay, and is used to help form that question. If we wanted to put it in the present tense, we would say, do you know that? So the did is in the past tense, but we need the do, the verb do, to help formulate that question, right? and the subjunctive. And the subjunctive is used to talk about wishes, desires, or hypothetical situations. So, to talk about situations that are not based in reality, right? I wish that you would pay your taxes. You would in this case would be our auxiliary verb because it is giving assistance to the main verb, which is pay, right? And this sentence expresses a desire, right? It expresses a desire. So these are the elements of modality and mood. Now we are going to proceed to voice. Okay, so we move on to voice. And after we cover voice, we're going to look at two final uses of auxiliary verbs, okay? So when it comes to voice, we are talking about the passive voice. Now, when I say voice, what do I mean? So in a traditional sentence, the subject is expressed first, then we have the verb, and then we have the object, SVO. But in the passive voice, we have a switch in the order. The object takes subject position, and the subject takes object position. Okay? So this is what we call the passive voice. And it is formed by having the conjugative form of be, followed by the past participle of the main verb, and followed by the prepositional phrase. Now let's look at an example. The man saw two dogs. This is a sentence in the active voice. We have the agent or subject, the verb, and then we have the object, right? So in the passive voice, the object takes subject position. So two dogs were seen by the man. So the formula is that we take the main verb. We look at the main verb in the active voice and we ask ourselves, what is the tense? So it's past tense. Therefore, that has to dictate what the verb be will be in terms of tense. So because it's past tense, the verb to be must be in the past tense. So two dogs were, the main verb was saw, which is from the verb to see. So what is the past participle of see? Seen. So two dogs were seen by the man. And then we have, of course, the agent at the end. So this is how we would form the passive voice, right? So when it comes to the passive voice, the verb to be is going to be our auxiliary verb. And remember that it takes the same, it is placed in the same tense as the original, or let's not say original, as the main verb, right? Or of the verb of the active sentence, okay? And please note, only transitive verbs can be used in the passive voice, which would be natural, right? Because transitive verbs refer to verbs that have that require an object, not have an object, that require an object, okay? So the only way we can construct a sentence in the passive voice is if it has an object. Therefore, transitive verbs are the only verbs that can be used in the passive voice. We cannot use a verb that is intransitive in the passive voice because there will be no objects. Okay? Now, these are two other uses of auxiliary verbs. We use auxiliary verbs for negation, and this is going to more relate to the verb do. So when we want to make a sentence negative in English, we would use not, but we also need to use the verb do. So in that case, do is a helping verb, right? So the verb do is used for negative sentences. For example, Thomas likes to study. If we want to make that negative, we not only have to include not, but we also must add do. Thomas does not like to study, right? So the verb do in that case is not the main verb. It is helping to form a negation. Okay? We did our homework. If we want to make that negative, we have to add not, but we also need to add the verb do. And this is past tense. So we did not do our homework. So the did in this case is an auxiliary verb to do. And did would also indicate tense as well. But yes, the verb do can be used to form negative sentences, right? And do can also be used for emphasis, right? And this is going to be the case for affirmative sentences. So these are sentences that just make a statement, right? So the formula is going to be do followed by the base form of the verb, right? Or the infinitive, but without the to, right? For example, I do study often. Why can't I say I study often? But I do study often. Do is used for emphasis, right? So when I use the verb do there, I'm saying, yes, I'm emphasizing how often, no, but not how often that I study often. Not how often, but I'm emphasizing the fact that I study often. I do study often, right? Because I could also say I study often, but the do, right, is used for emphasis. Another example, Mark did do it. Once again, I could have said Mark did it, but Mark did do it, right? The did in this case would be our auxiliary verb, and what it is doing, is that it is emphasizing the fact that Mark, did it. He did do it, right? So yes, the verb do can be used for emphasis as well as negation. So these are all the elements that would be classified as support when it comes to auxiliary verbs. So this brings us to the end of this lesson. I hope that you understood everything. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.